All right. Hello, everybody. It's about 2 minutes after the hour, so we're going to get started. If we have not met before, I am Drew McLellan, one of the co-owners of Agency Management Institute. My co-pilot today is Susan Beyer from Audit. We do this research together every year. This is our 14th year. And so what we do, our process is pretty simple in terms of deciding what we want to talk about. Susan and I get together. We think about all the conversations we've had with agency owners and leaders over the last 6 months and kind of what is the sort of the hot spot that we can be most helpful around. And after the abysmal new business year that was 2023, it was very clear to us that 24 should be all about biz dev. So this is all about getting hired in 2024. How to get found, hired, and retained. We went into the field of this for this study right after the start of the year.
March.
This data was fresh, brand new at the Build a Better Agency Summit in May, where we presented it, and now we are happy to share it with you. So our goal is pretty simple today. We're going to walk you through the questions. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. And then if you have questions about something specific we're talking about, ask, and I will try and pause the presentation and answer your questions on the spot between Susan and I. We'll also hopefully have time at the end of this. We will hard stop after 90 minutes, so 3:30 my time.
Yes, please.
And then I'm going to mute all of you. And then Susan, I will unmute you. So I do like the power of muting, I have to admit. Okay. All right. Let's dig in, shall we?
Yes. And by the way, I think it's 11 years. I think it just feels like 14
years. It's like dog years.
Okay. Well, this study, is actually one, Drew, that we've done with some changes since our very first study in 2014. And we did update it, but again, it's about how agencies are getting hired. So as we said, March, and we were really looking at the types of clients that small to mid-sized agencies are serving. So everybody in this study had revenues of below 500 million and budgets below 20. We have folks from all over the country. And that number of respondents gives us a very high confidence level on the study. So everything you all are going to see, as always with this research, is statistically reliable, good, strong data that you can depend on. So we're going to start with the segmentation because for those of you who are new with us, this research series incorporates what's called attitudinal segmentation, which gives us a view of the mindsets of the people in this audience, not just sort of their demographics and their behaviors and interests and stuff like that. It's what's sort of behind the perceptions that they have about their agency and the situation that they're facing today. And these segments we don't predetermine these. Drew and I don't sit down and go, hey, I think there are 4 this year or 5 this year, and what they are. It's all based on the data that we get. So this year we have 3 segments. Those of you who have been with us since 2014 will know that we had 3 segments, both in 2014 and 2019, but there's been some important changes this year compared to the previous years. You can see their relative size. We're going to look at each of them in detail. But what you're going to want to remember is that this middle one, number 2, begrudging buyers, is the biggest group. That's going to become relevant. So let's talk about the first segment. We call these folks agency advocates, and we've seen them over the years. They are very pro-agency. They really believe in what agencies provide. They believe it's critical for their business. And they love agencies for both strategic and tactical reasons. You can see the attitudes that define this group of agencies, which I believe is 29% of our total. You can see their average score on these. We gave everybody in the survey a scale on all of these attitudinal items. That 1 was a disagree completely, 6 is agree completely. This line is the line between agreement and disagreement. And you can see how strongly these folks agree. And also for them, all of these things are linked. So when they talk about agencies being the best resource for a variety of things, they also believe that marketing requires a lot of specific technical expertise, and those two perspectives are linked for them. So lots of really positive things here. And I think, Drew, one of the things we looked at when we compared these results to the ones that we'd gotten, say, 5 years ago, is the increase that we've seen in top 2 box agreement with these positive ratings about agencies are really dramatic and statistically significant. There's been an upswing in how many of our clients feel about the importance of agencies in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so that's good. So one of the things that is true about this study, in many years, when we present this data, sometimes there's a lot of unhappy news here. And we're kind of excited that this study has actually a lot of good news for us. And that's a great example of what you're going to see is overall, people are feeling better about agencies and their agency relationship in different ways in each segment. But there seems to be more positive sentiment about agencies than we have seen in the past. So we'll take that.
Yeah. So, for example, the main value of agencies is developing strategy. That attitude got a 19-point top 2 box bump versus 5 years ago. Similar numbers for we're the best resource for tactical execution. We're the best resource for the latest trends. We provide an unbiased perspective, new ideas. And we're the best resource for effective strategies. So a lot of positivity coming from everyone across the board, not just the agency advocates, but these are the folks that, we want all of our clients to be, right? They love us, they believe in us, they trust us, and they listen to us. Okay, let's look at a segment that's very different. This segment is called begrudging buyers. This is the largest group, 43%. Ouch. And these folks see agencies as something they need to have. They don't necessarily love to have it, but they say they don't have the expertise they need. And one of the things we saw with this group in particular this year is that while they do marketing, it's not their top priority. So it's not just agencies, I think it's marketing in general that is just sort of one of those things that they feel is a necessary evil. So you see them talking about how it costs more than it should. They tend to like bigger agencies. We're going to talk about that in a minute. They say they've got plenty of time to do marketing, but they don't have the expertise and they need the help of professionals, which is why they're hiring agencies. They also say that it's important to change agencies periodically, even if they're doing a good job. And you can see, while that is not a 6 on a 6-point scale here, they're in agreement where everybody else has strong disagreement with that statement. And here's the note about not considering marketing a high priority. So they sort of have a really different perspective. You're trying to sell to folks like this, or you're trying to serve them as a client. They're going to look really different than the agency advocates, Drew.
Yeah, I think the reality is that these are folks who are more transactional, right? And they recognize the value that agencies bring, but it's not as relational. It's really about the fact that they can't get it all done internally, so they have to work with an agency, as opposed to the agency advocates who really welcome the agency's participation.
Yes. And the one bright spot here is that when we look at top 2 box ratings for that statement, that hiring a marketing agency is a necessary evil, because that's one we've had for the last 10 years.
Yep.
In the last 5 years, top 2 box percentage on that has dropped by 10 points, which is statistically significant. So yeah, in addition to all the pluses on the good attitudes, even sort of that bad attitude about agencies has softened in the last 5 years. Okay, group 3, exacting experts. And this is a really new group this year. We've seen some sort of different folks in terms of being persnickety about things or really caring. This is the first year we've seen a whole segment that is defined by their belief that they really know what they're doing and their interest in a particular type of agency to help them. So these folks are specialized overwhelmingly. We're going to see some of that data, but they want specialized marketing agencies. And they want agencies that are going to bring them new ideas without having to ask for them. But they also want agencies to listen to them and learn from them and their team, because they believe they know a lot about the marketing that they need to be doing, what works for them, the environment that they're existing in from a marketing standpoint. One of the things these folks say is that their organization has the expertise to do their own marketing, but they don't have the time. Despite all this sort of understanding that they have, they just can't get it all done. They also say that finding the right marketing agency is mostly about a good personality fit. So they're really they're going to be persnickety about their choice of an agency, Drew.
Yeah, and this group, much more than the other two, really does have a high impression of themselves, their ability to sort of manage the work, to know the right answers. And so they are looking for a different level of relationship with an agency, because they want ideas, but they also want the agency to deeply respect that they know what they're doing. So they're looking for something that is going to be collaborative, but that it's not the agency guiding the client. It's really about, in many cases, the client guiding the agency.
For sure. And this first attitude about agencies consistently approaching them with new ideas and recommendations without the client having to ask, we actually added that this year because last year's Agency Edge, clients told us that they wanted that. Yeah. That was one of the best things that agencies could do for them, and that they had money and were willing to spend on stuff that the agency brought to that. They just weren't bringing it. So this is a group that's really important from that standpoint. There are some attitudes that didn't end up sort of defining any particular group. Our clients don't expect us to know everything, but they do expect us to know where to find answers that they need. They expect us to stay up to date on new marketing tactics and approaches. So stuff like AI and stuff like that, they want their agencies to be leading them with respect to that. They also, this is an interesting dichotomy that we've seen for the last couple of years, Drew. They want specialists, but they also want their specialist agency to be able to handle any marketing tactic in-house. So, it doesn't necessarily mean they want generalists, but you need to be able to deliver within your sort of specialist area.
And probably bring them other partners who can fill in the blanks of what your agency can't do. And we've seen that the last couple of years, Susan, where, for a while, things we've seen, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is the number of agencies that a client wants to manage is getting smaller and smaller. They still, for the most part, don't just want one agency, but they want fewer and fewer agencies, and they're looking to their sort of lead agency to be able to be the source of other agency partnerships. So again, for those of you that are involved in AMI or some other agency association, this is a great opportunity for you to have, collaborative partnerships with agencies that do what you don't do, and go after work together and kind of subcontract to each other.
For sure. Okay, so we've got the chat open. I'm going to keep rolling so that we can wrap up within our 90 minutes. But if you have any questions on anything that we're going through, just put it in the chat. Drew will interrupt me, which is usually what he has to do to stop me from talking, and we'll respond to that. So now that we have these segments and they are statistically reliable within the group, we can take a look at the characteristics of these folks and see where we see differences in terms of their demographics by segment and where we don't. So this is title. We see 42% of the folks in this study are owners, and another 18% are CEOs. So we have a lot of senior people in the study, which is great. There's not a difference in title in terms of segment. Here we've got age, and you can see, we've got a bump here when you get below 50, as might be expected, but we've got a good range of folks age-wise in the study. This is segment by age group. So you could see the segment distribution here, the 28, 43, 29, and now you can see it by age group. And what I want you to notice here, which is statistically significant, is that 55% of the respondents in the study under 40 fall into that begrudging buyers group which is significantly more than we see in any of the other groups and in the total population. So they over-index under 40 as begrudging buyers, something to be aware of if you're dealing with prospects or clients who may be under that age. They may be more likely to be that type of a buyer, which I found interesting. I thought it would be the grumpy old people.
So it is interesting though, because you sort of wonder, does some of that arrogance or attitude as they are deeper in their career kind of get tempered down a little bit? Right. Yeah.
Because
I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I realize I don't know. So, I think you're less black. The world's less black and white, right?
That's right. So we definitely see a huge shift when we move into the 60s and stuff like this between what we see in the agency advocates. They sort of flip between those two age groups. Our respondents are responsible for decision making. So 75% say they are the decision maker, and the bulk of the rest of them are participating in decisions about activities and marketing strategies. And then we've got some folks here who are responsible for budget, even if they're not a decision maker. Here's the spending, 75% a decision maker when it comes to spending. So again, we've got the right folks in the room to look at the data. 87% of them have participated in hiring a new agency at some point in their career. So we've got people who have experience with this. When we look at their organizations, we've got a lot of folks selling B2C and B2B, as would be expected. We've got some nonprofits and a smattering. They could pick more than one on this list. So we've got, this isn't just B2C clients or B2B. We've got a really nice mix of those in here. Here is their 2024 revenue projected. Now, this was collected in March, so they were sort of looking ahead, but you can see 59% of them have revenue that is 10 million or less. And then we've got a distribution of folks up to 500 million. You're looking at the live visualization here, and one of the things that we're going to provide you is a link to this, so you can actually explore this yourself. And some of the ways you're going to see us doing it today, you're going to get access to this. And this is their marketing budget. So 34% say their budget is under 250,000, but 31% say it's at least $1 million. So again, a range of what's going on here from a budget standpoint. 76% of these respondents say they have an in-house marketing team, which is a significant increase from both 5 years ago when it was 68% and 10 years ago when it was 51%. So that's an interesting change, I think, especially to have it sort of fall, outside the bounds of what could be margin of error. That's a pretty large number for folks having an in-house team.
Right. And, this is a pendulum we see swing back and forth all the time in terms of does a brand or a company have in-house marketing support? And B, and we'll get to this in a second, how big is that team?
Right.
So for many of you, you're happy to have an in-house marketing team of some kind in-house because then you have an advocate in-house. But as you're going to see in a couple of minutes, there's some good news in this for us, I think.
There is indeed. When we look at that, whether you have an in-house team by segment, we see a significant difference with respect to agency advocates, making up a greater percentage of the folks who say that they do not have an in-house team. So not only do they love agencies and they trust them or listen to them, they don't have a team in-house. They may have an expert, marketer as their CMO or something, but they don't have a team in-house at greater rates than we see the folks who do have a team. And here's marketing team size.
So this is where some of the good news is, right? These are not ginormous teams. These are kind of skeleton teams, which again, for a lot of you is advantageous because otherwise you're dealing with the business owner or the president or somebody who has no marketing savvy at all. And in this case, you've got an advocate inside whose job it is to help the company do marketing and sales. And so in theory, they are, on your side.
Yeah, and this is a big bump. In both 2014 and 2019, the percentage that said they had one or two employees in their in-house team was only 8%. And now we're at 20 5 years later. So the folks who have teams, they're getting smaller as we've been seeing over time.
And honestly, we saw this. This was, I think, again, remember we did this in March of 24. 23 was not just hard for agencies, it was hard for everybody. And so we saw a lot of in-house marketing teams. One of the reasons why it's been easier for all of you to hire is because there's been a flood of people, because there have been layoffs both on the agency side and the client side in the marketing space. And so it's one of the reasons why I think the teams are getting smaller.
Yeah. I want to take a moment and just show you all, when you get this visualization, one of the things that you're going to be able to do is look at the data by a whole range of stuff. So you can look at it by segment. I'll just show you how this view selector works real quick. And bam, you're looking at it by segment. So there are the agency advocates, and you see how their numbers are distributed out across team size versus what we see in the begrudging buyers, who definitely are less likely to have those little tiny teams. So there's a ton of stuff in here for you to look at the data by that we built in for you. So for those of you who are data nerds out there, go to town. You could probably spend the next year digging into this. Okay, let's talk about their agency relationships. Again, this is a choose all that apply question. You'll always see the questions down here. Oh no, this is a single select. So if this was a choose all that apply, it will say that here, but you can always see the question. So we see a lot of folks using agencies for strategic guidance and regularly for project execution. Only 16% of our folks said they have an agency of record.
Which this is a trend we've seen really for the last decade. Clients, and all of you are seeing it, we talk about it all the time. Clients are less and less inclined or less and less interested in naming an agency the agency of record. So that's and this
is a choose all that apply, actually. And one of the things you can see is our agency advocates up here more likely to say that they're both doing strategic guidance and regular execution with folks. Begrudging buyer is a little more likely to say that they've actually got that agency of record. How many agencies are you currently working with in your organization? 39% of them say one, which is significantly more than we saw either in 2019 or 2014, when it was only 19%. So we're seeing, it's interesting because over the last, I don't know what, Drew, like 10 years maybe, we've been seeing people saying more likely to work with more than one agency. And in this study, we see a larger group of folks working with only one than we've ever seen.
I think probably since the beginning of doing the study. So again, while this is significant, please recognize that still the majority of agencies or the clients have more than one agency in there. So I do not believe this is that we're going back to the agency of record model that was, probably a couple of decades ago.
Yeah. And one of the things you can see, here's our exacting experts, and here are our agency advocates, significantly more likely than our begrudging buyers to have only one agency. You'll understand why. Remember that whole, we're changing out agencies even if they're doing a good job? Here are those. Look at this. If you're working with more than 5 agencies, 60% of those respondents are begrudging buyers that are working with more than 5 agencies, compared to only 32% of those who are working with one. So we definitely see that particular group, that middle begrudging buyer group that is bigger, working with more agencies overall than our other respondents are.
And part of that, remember, is that's the group that's more transactional. And so they're more likely to go, I want an agency to do this one thing versus all the things, right? They're going to be much more prescriptive about the work and keep everybody kind of in their own narrow lane. So therefore, if they have a variety of needs, they're going to have a variety of agencies.
Yeah, they just hire agencies. This was interesting. This is a new question. How has your thinking around the optimal number of agencies changed in the past few years? Has it changed? And 63%, almost 2/3, say their thinking has changed in the past few years. Begrudging buyers are significantly more likely than agency advocates to say that it has changed. Look, 35% of those begrudging buyers and 46% say it's changed to some degree. And then we asked them, so that's a lot of people saying, yeah, I think differently about this than I have thought about it. But look at the percentage, 68% of those who said their thinking has changed now say, I've come to believe it's best to work with a smaller number of agencies than I used to feel was optimal.
And we saw that, we've seen that trend over the last couple of years, that clients were kind of exhausted at managing so many agencies. And the first step of that was, okay, I'm exhausted by this. I'm going to start asking my lead agency to manage the other agencies. And now what they're saying is, and we're seeing in the numbers, not only am I going to do that, but I need to skinny down the number of agencies. And we've seen a lot of consolidation where particularly larger brands who have been working with 5, 6, 7, 8 agencies. And we've had some AMI agencies affected by this, both good and bad, where they send something out that says, look, we're getting down to 2 agencies or 3 agencies. Everybody, give us your pitch. And we've had agencies in our world that have benefited from that and gotten more business. And we've had agencies that unfortunately didn't make the cut and lost a significant piece of business because they weren't one of the ones that got narrowed down. For sure.
And that point about really struggling to get agencies to work together and get everybody on the same page has been a long-standing one and one of the top challenges that we've seen in a lot of the studies that clients say they have with their agencies. So begrudging buyers, 35% of them say they want to work with more than they do now. But that's the only group that's really saying that. 57% say they plan to work with the same number of agencies in 2024 as they did last year. 28% say they're going to work with more, 9% fewer. So, there's folks making progress on this, but a lot of folks plan to kind of stay where they are. So one of the things we've seen in the work that we've done over the last few years, Drew, is this trust issue come up so predominantly as trust has really collapsed societally. Clients are looking for reasons to trust their agencies, both to hire that agency and to stay with that agency over time.
Well, and I think too, we have to remember that, their job's on the line. Yeah. And coming out of COVID, when, nobody was producing a lot of results unless you were in a very specific kind of industry, our clients are under a lot of pressure to really hit their KPIs. And if they don't have a lot of confidence and trust in their agency, they're not willing to take the risk. Yeah.
So this is a choose all that apply question. So for example, 46% chose this, but they can also choose, something down here. But the stuff at the top is really about expertise and demonstrating that expertise and relationships. So the top one, and it's within margin of error of some of these things at the top, but who say that the people on my account are knowledgeable and experienced. It's not just you, it's the team that's working for them. Agencies showing proof that they can deliver results. So this is the case study argument, folks. You really need to have some of that. The agency shares helpful advice and resources with us before being hired. So this is the thought leadership, right? This is the stuff that you're teaching, Drew, to agencies about how to get out there and be helpful and show that you understand their industry, their challenges before you make them pay you anything. Recommendations.
Well, again, it's the hint that you are knowledgeable and experienced, right? If your content is teaching and it's helpful to them, then the number 3 and 4 hint at number 1, right?
Yep, for sure. Yep. So I'm not going to go through this whole list. There's a lot on it, but I do want to point this out. Look at the bottom. The agency services cost less than those of other marketing agencies. So in a list where they could choose all they want to, they were not limited, only 17% said that is a trust builder. So having lower fees may actually not be helping you in that situation. Hang on
just a second.
Yeah,
so
please.
We will on LinkedIn, in the AMI Facebook page, in the newsletter. We will probably next week share with you a link where you can download a copy of this video. You can get all links to all of this. So I know, and for some of you, this type is small and it's hard to read, and we're going through it quickly. But just know we're going to give you these resources so you can review them at your leisure. So don't be like, oh crap, I can't see what the 17th thing is. Just know we're going to give you resources to be able to do that. So our goal today is just to give you kind of the highlights of the research, and then for you to be able to dive in.
Yeah, it's a fire hose of data, as we say.
Yes.
And you're going to see this pattern, but just know that the begrudging buyers are less likely to cite almost anything as building their trust with an agency compared to the agency advocates and the exacting experts. So just be aware of that. Oh, I love this conversation.
And again, remember, they are more transactional, so that they're more likely to be buying stuff or something they're dictating, and therefore they don't have to have the same high level of trust, right? So,
and they don't want the same kind of relationship. They don't have the same kind of relationships. They're willing to bounce agencies. So so probably not as critical for them. Okay, one of our favorite conversations, niche or generalist. So last year when we did our study, we saw this dichotomy between people really wanting a specialist who was really niched in their area, but people wanting them to be able to do any kind of marketing tactic. So we dug into that a little more in this study than we have in the past. And we asked folks, what is the right mix in their mind of generalist versus specialist agencies? And we gave them a definition, which you can go down here. But look at the distribution, folks, from 13% who say they want all generalists. And this isn't what they have, it's what they think is right for them. And 29% who want all specialists. And everybody in between wants kind of a mix. But only 30% say all or mostly generalists will be best. 70% are leaning towards specialists if they're not all specialists preferred.
And again, remember, specialists might be expertise in their industry. It might be that you're deliverable, like you're a PPC shop or something like that. So specialist isn't just about we're an automotive agency. It's you understand their industry, you understand their audience, or you have a very specific skill set around a deliverable.
Right, exactly. You could see begrudging buyers a little more likely on the generalist side of things. We see everybody, close in here in terms of all specialists. So this distributes across all these segments, guys. And you can look and you can see the segment distribution here when we look at what's happening with the begrudging buyers. 75% of those who want all generalist agencies are begrudging buyers, and 57% are most of those who say mostly generalist are begrudging buyers. So if you have a prospect who's like that, or a client, recognize that is something that they hold near and dear to their heart, an agency that can do anything for them. Even though they're also 52% of the folks who say they want all specialists. So this can be, I think, tricky for agencies to navigate in terms of how to represent themselves, Drew.
Well, I think the key is you are what you are, and you represent that accurately, and then the clients will self-select if you're the right fit for them. So, I think it's always dangerous to try and be something you're not in the buying process.
Yeah, I agree. But it's maybe if you are a specialist, it's worthwhile to remember that you need to talk about all the things within your specialty that you can handle for a client.
That's right.
In terms of, maybe all the different types of executions that you've got. 45% of the clients in our study said their organization definitely has a niche, and 39% says it sort of does. So these are lots of folks, the vast majority of these clients, saying they have a niche or specialty themselves. And when we ask them, how are your agencies all specialized or niche or something in between? The folks who say they definitely have a niche are much more likely to say that their agencies are niched as well, which makes sense. Right, Drew?
Yeah, it does. But I think this is fascinating that they obviously see the value of niching for their own business. So you can see how that would align with them seeing the value of partners who are also specialists or niche in what they do. So I think I do think these two things sort of lay nicely on top of each other.
For sure. And we asked folks what their organization's niche is based on, because as with agencies, it can be based on a whole lot of stuff. And man, do we see a whole lot of stuff. Industry, type of customer, something we do, geography, a problem we solve, a method or process or whatever. So complex niches operating among our clients, just like among our agencies. We asked these respondents if having a niche, to what extent it gives an agency an advantage when they are hiring an agency, when their organization is hiring an agency. And look at the numbers. 97% say having a niche gives an agency an advantage to at least some degree in being hired. And look at the segment results across the board. So this data just speaks even more strongly than what we've been seeing over the past few years, Drew, that having a niche helps in getting hired. Okay. How did they find us?
You guys are very quiet. Are you?
I know we have no chat.
Somebody put something in the chat just so I know that it's actually
maybe it's not working.
and you're alive.
Maybe they're dumbfounded by the fire hose of information. That happens.
There we go. All right.
Yay! Thank you, Carly. Right. Okay, Bob's here. Carly's here. Okay.
All right.
Great. Okay.
All right. I just want to make sure you guys are with us.
So one of the things you wanted to ask this year when we talked about this study is you wanted to know from the start of a search for a new agency, how long clients expect that search to take.
Because a lot of you have been talking about how long the sales cycle is, right? So we wanted to sort of get some data from the client's perspective. Does it feel long to them too?
Yeah, 62% say they expect it to take 3 months or less. 38% say more than 3 months. So there's some mixed opinions, I guess, about that. But
nobody was like, it's going to take a week or 2 weeks. I mean,
right. It's going to take
how we want it.
So that's good. Yeah, we wanted to go fast. And we asked a similar question to these folks about how they think about finding and evaluating agencies and whether that has changed over the last few years. And 59% say it really has. 21% definitely, 38% to some degree. So there's been a shift in how they think about that as well. And when we have an open-ended question about how it's changed, and we saw some interesting things. So these were I pulled these, they're kind of representative of what we saw. So the agency advocate, one of them said, we've learned more about marketing and we know better what to ask and look for. The begrudging buyer said, we are looking for bigger agencies that can handle more volume. That aligns with what the begrudging buyers told us.
That doesn't suggest strategy, it suggests output, right?
Right. Yeah. And exacting expert, I love this. We narrow the field to 3 to 4 agencies and then do a deep dive with each. That's not surprising with someone who's in that segment with the level of expertise and acumen they believe they have around marketing, and the fact that they're really looking for that good personality, some of those other things.
I think, Susan, I'm curious what you think too, and this is a little bit of interpretation on our part. I think the respondents this year are more confident in their ability to hire an agency and to know how to direct their agency. Like they feel better about their own marketing acumen than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the begrudging buyers admit that they don't know what they're doing, right? And that's why they're hiring agencies. But the other two, absolutely, they know what they want, and now they know what to ask for, and they know what to look for. So we have to have our shoelaces tied when we go into those kinds of situations.
Right.
How are they finding prospective agencies to consider? So this is at the very beginning of the search process. Like, who should we even have in our consideration pool? Again, a choose all that apply. Number 1, online research. Recommendations from colleagues is big. And number 3, we're going to have more on this in a minute. Review direct outreach to us from agencies, cited by 34%. as sort of setting their consideration set. So we're going to have a lot more. We dug into outreach on this, but I, as an agency owner, sort of worry about my outreach and is it being intrusive, and are people even looking at it? And the answer is no and yes.
Right.
So a lot of them are looking for that. Trade shows and conferences are a big deal. Yes, people are still doing RFIs and RFPs. I'm sorry to say, we're going to have more information on their intention to keep doing that. Some of the pubs are good. The winners at awards show, 19% say they hire a search consultant when they're going into an agency search. When did your organization hire its most recent agency? 73% say it's within the last 3 years. And how did you first hear of the agency that you hired last? Right? Referral. Mm-hmm. Online search. I love this one. Saw their work and inquired about who had done it. Look at that. Some social media or direct outreach from the agency. Research conducted by the agency. There's thought leadership, right? There's somebody in my organization regularly following their content, video content for the leader or owner. So lots of ways they're finding us, but referrals remain big. I'm sure everybody has had that experience.
But again, I think the important thing is they're out looking, and
mm-hmm.
they are, one of the questions is, where online are they swimming? I don't think we asked that question, did we?
I think we have some in terms of influencing. I don't remember. Maybe we didn't this year. I'll double check. What we've seen, I can tell you, for B2B in general is LinkedIn, YouTube, conferences. People love research. Yeah. If you can get your thought leadership out there, that's going to really help. Okay. How often do you get direct outreach from an agency that you are not working with? So regardless of how it comes in, phone calls, email, mail, how often are you getting it? 68% of our respondents say they're getting it at least a few times a month. Oh, look, I added an extra E in agencies. Good job, Susan. There's no difference between the segments on this. So these folks are getting quite a bit of outreach from agencies that they are not working with in every month. So if you're doing this, you are not alone. And we asked folks, if you were looking for a new marketing agency, how would you want to find it? Do you want them to find you, or do you reach out to you, or do you want to find it yourself? About 20% say they wanted to find it themselves, but a lot of them, 75%, say they like having agency outreach as a part of their process for finding agencies. Begrudging buyers are significantly more likely than other segments to say they want agencies to reach out to them, because honestly, finding agencies is work and they don't want to invest in it. They don't care that much, to be real honest. But most folks are asking for agency outreach to be part of the process of finding new agencies.
And again, remember, outreach is probably not knocking on their door asking if they have any projects for you to do. Outreach is beginning to cultivate a relationship. Go back to some of the earlier things in the earlier questions. It's about thought leadership. It's about demonstrating your expertise. It's about being smart and helping them be smarter. It's the stuff we've talked about for years around thought leadership, being an authority, and being generous with what you know and helping them do their job long before they hire you.
Yep. Okay, so we know how often they're getting outreach. Then we asked them how often they're looking at it, right? Regardless of segment, clients say they are often reviewing the agency outreach they give. 20% of them say they review it every time, 34% most of the time. So it is getting seen. And when we ask them why they review it, here are some of the open-ended answers. So you've gotten outreach. Why are you taking the time that it takes to look through it? Here's to your point, Drew. I've heard good things about the agency that made it worth checking out. So that's not somebody I've never heard of. I haven't worked with them, but I've heard somebody's talking about them. Their mission statement. aligned with our values. I thought that was interesting from a begrudging buyer. I love this one. They were able to state their specialization without difficulty or complexity. How many of us are doing that effectively? I'm not sure. And to your point, Drew, how often have you heard of the agencies that are reaching out to you? Nearly always they have heard something. Only 1% say they have never heard of an agency reaching out to them. So there is sort of an ecosystem out there where clients are hearing about agencies or coming across their content or seeing their CEO speak at a conference or whatever. So these agencies, the names are familiar to them.
So there's a familiarity that invites them actually engaging with your content. So again, this is all about, nurturing and building relationships and having something of value to say to them, and then they'll start to pay attention.
Yeah, Roger says awareness is vital. That's absolutely true.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so when you choose to review, what makes you review the outreach? What influences that? Well, number one, the agency has a good reputation, and look at that for agency advocates. Your reputation matters, folks. And one of the things that we've seen across studies is how much agency reputation has to do with getting considered, getting hired, and clients staying with their agencies. I recognize the agency's name. I know somebody who's worked there. People at the agency shared helpful information and content on social media. Somebody who works there has a good reputation. Again, helpful information and content on social media, speaking at conferences. So, even books and stuff. So the more you can get your agency visible out there in front of folks, that actually does have an influence on whether they look at what you send them. So you've reviewed the outreach. Now, how often do you have a conversation? And that could be face-to-face or by email or whatever with an agency that's reached out to you, but you're not working with. 49% say at least some of the time. Begrudging buyers are more likely to do it more often because, again, they're churning agencies. They kind of need a pipeline of agencies to consider, and they're willing to dump one of their current agencies if somebody else has shiny objects, maybe. But lots of folks are,
Go ahead, finish up your sentence.
I was just going to say lots of folks are having conversations based on that outreach.
Roger's asking if they care about awards. I'm trying to remember if we asked in this segment or in this study. Roger, in the past couple of years, we have asked, and much to the agency owner's chagrin, they did care about awards.
Yeah.
But I
wish we could get away from
it.
No, I don't think it was in this one either, because we've seen it be so consistent before. Okay. Why do you have a conversation? If you choose to have a conversation, why? So lots of really good stuff in here in terms of what turns outreach into an actual conversation. Having something unique to say. The information was relevant and helpful. We've seen this over and over again, Drew. Be helpful before I have to hire you. They've done their homework to learn about my organization. I liked the tone. Good information shared that was surprising and personable. Very few saying I felt obligated because the agency has a relationship with other people that I know. So how do you recognize a poor fit? And this was an open-ended question again, but look at some of these examples, showing a clear lack of understanding of our goals. So that whole you need to do your homework on us thing is showing up here. Their online presence doesn't support their claims. So we're experts, we're the best at everything, but they're not seeing any content. They're not seeing anything that supports that reputation. If an agency hasn't done their homework into my company, it's a huge ick from an exacting expert.
That's technical marketing language.
Technical marketing jargon.
Yeah.
Have you ever hired an unfamiliar agency that reached out to you? 31% say they have. And this is an agency that you had not even heard of. So even if most of the folks are getting outreach from, they have heard from, but even if they haven't heard from you, about 30% of them say they've hired somebody like that. Begrudging buyers, significantly more likely, because again, their bar is lower for what they're looking for in an agency in terms of a lot of the research and stuff that they're going to do behind the scenes. So what are the catalysts that made you need to hire an agency? And I think this is really interesting data, Drew, and some of it's sort of a cautionary tale, right?
Yeah, right.
New opportunity, that's great. But a lot of the things on this list are about disappointment with current agencies. It's, we do have some folks who are saying, hey, I've got something new to do and I maybe need a new tactic and somebody who specializes in a new market or something like that. But a lot of them, look, not returning ROI. They don't have the expertise to do something we need. We're disappointed with their performance. We need more insight about our target market. We're disappointed with the customer service. We want a specialist in our industry and our particular marketing approach. There's only 15% of them that say it's about money. A lot of it is about the performance of the agencies they currently have.
So, one of the things that we have seen over and over again is that clients are not super inclined to engage with us when they're unhappy. They just break up with us. And so, was it a couple years ago, Susan? I think it was like from the first time they think of firing us till they fire us is like less than a month.
Yeah, right? And we don't know. They don't tell us.
And we don't know until they break up.
Big percentage didn't tell us we were on the chopping block.
So the good news for you, if you're prospecting, is if they have an agency, the agency may be in a lot of trouble and the agency doesn't know to fix it. The cautionary tale that Susan is alluding to is you need to be taking good care of your clients. You need to be asking them how they are feeling. So the newsletter that I sent out today was all about listening better to clients and asking them what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, because expecting them to proactively tell us without prompting clearly is not happening as much as we want it to. So this is sort of an aside from this data, but it just sort of coincides. You need really to be asking. Yeah.
And for those of you who are new to this series, check out last year's Agency Edge study. It's on the Agency Management Institute website, because in that one, we were looking specifically at what makes clients spend more money with their existing agencies. And man, it's just a treasure trove of information. And so much of it is about that relationship and talk to us and, help us and check in with us. And, there's just a ton of great data in there about how you can really work with your current agencies. I wanted to show you this. There's not a lot of difference here, gang, between these segments. There's a lot of consistency between what's making folks hire a new agency. So regardless of who you're looking at, what type of segment they're in, they're going to be represented on that list pretty similarly to everybody else. 46% of folks who have hired an agency say that it was hired to replace another agency. Not surprising. So you're taking over somebody else's job. And those choosing agencies, a lot of it at the top, but especially in larger organizations, we see the CEO showing up more often. But look at how often there's more people involved in this. So the more relationships, and we've said this before based on earlier data, Drew, the more relationships you can have within an agency and the more people there that know you because you're providing helpful content for their job or whatever, the better.
Yeah. So Carly's just making a comment saying one of our professional service clients just did an internal review of their RFPs and proposals and found the same thing. Their partners aren't listening. So again, this is just such an easy fix for us. It's such an easy thing for us to do that we don't allow enough time and energy and maybe budget to do, but boy, is it critical.
Yep. So this is how their organization is assessing agencies that they're thinking about hiring. This is what they're looking at. So yes, number one, in-person meeting, and we've got some virtual meetings in here too. But there's also, research into the agency's content and publication, into the personnel, into the reputation. Yes, reviewing agency proposals, looking at responses to an RFP. Only 18% though, Drew, are using some kind of an established scorecard, which did you expect that to be higher or lower?
I I want it to be higher.
Right.
But I didn't expect it. I think they are sloppy about it. I don't think they know, unless they're working with a search firm or they have a really experienced person sort of leading their internal search. I don't think they know how to do this. I think oftentimes, and this is why we talk about chemistry and why that's important. I think so often, two things. Number one, I think by the time they're actually talking to an agency, they have already culled down to people that they think can do the work. So especially if you have a subject matter expertise or you're an authority, they've already checked the box of, yes, they're competent. So then I think the scorecard is more like, how do I feel about them? Are these people I want to work with? Do I feel like they are listening to me? Depending on the segment, are they giving me good ideas or are they just getting right to execution? So no, unfortunately, I don't think they're very systematic about that.
And I wanted to just show this. Now, not surprisingly, right, begrudging buyers less likely to do some of the stuff as they're thinking about hiring an agency. That doesn't surprise me very much. But look at the extent, whether it's agency advocates or exacting experts that are digging into your agency, its people, its publications, its reputation. Have your ducks in a row before you go in, because before you do your outreach, because this is the kind of thing that they're looking at, and if you don't have it, it's not going to help you in the process. We're still dealing in sort of with this post-COVID hybrid world. So we asked, if you're considering hiring an agency, how important is it to meet face-to-face with them during the decision process? Only 36% say it's essential, but that's 36%. And then another 41 say it's very important. So I think you were saying at the BABA conference, the Build a Better Agency conference, Drew, that like it or not, we have to get in front of prospects a lot of the time if they're going to hire us.
And by the way, I also think that's one of the ways you sustain a relationship. It's not just in the selling process. This is focused on selling. But I also think that a lot of you and your account service people are very guilty of this. Shoot, if they can text or email, they don't even get on the phone or a Zoom with their client, let alone get their butt on a plane and go see the client. And I think we underestimate the importance of how that cements a relationship.
Yep. And especially look at those two sort of groups, advocates and experts, essential, much more likely. Almost half of them say that face-to-face is essential. Now, we did follow up and say, all right, is a video meeting an acceptable alternative to face-to-face? 33% say it definitely is. Everybody else is like, eh. So you can't necessarily get away with making it a live Zoom meeting. They really want to see you. And who do they want to see? I love this question, Drew. Who do you expect to be in that face-to-face meeting? You might be surprised, folks. Beating out senior agency leadership by 1% is the account team I would be working with. 40% want to meet the creative team. Only 26% want to meet the strategy team. I guess we strategy folks are not that popular, but they don't want to just see you if you're the owner or you if you're the senior, business development person or whatever. They really want to see the people they're going to be working with, Drew.
And really, this gets back to the question of, I want the people I'm working with day in and day out to be knowledgeable and experienced. So, we often talk about how some agencies bait and switch. They have a pitch team, and then they have another team that actually does the work. And so clients feel betrayed by that. And they want us to be able to put the team that's going to be in front and center, who's going to be on their account there. So Roger, to answer your question.
Great question, Roger.
Yeah. How do they expect you to assign a team if you haven't diagnosed their problem? You know what? You should be able to do that in a meeting or two. And before you finalize the deal, you should be saying, based on the fact that you need this, this, and this, here's the account team, or here's the creative team, or whatever. So they're not saying at the very first initial meeting has to be that their account person, for example, because that's usually the most critical person for the client is who's my day-to-day account person. But I think certainly before, what they're saying is, before I'm ready to hire you, I want to know who that team is. And in fairness, we should be able to do our due diligence enough to be able to say, here's the deal with, you want this, this, and this is why we're putting Drew on the account, is because that's his depth of expertise or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also asked how many calls or meetings are typical for them during the decision process of hiring a new agency. Most respondents honestly said 2 to 3 calls are what they're typically looking at. Okay. Bad news, downer news, folks, on this one. Sorry. We have a lot of folks that issued an RFP or RFI for agency searches at some point in the past, regardless of segment, 47% overall. And when we ask them to rate the effectiveness of that process in terms of finding good agencies to consider, the folks who were doing the RFPs, not surprisingly, find them pretty darn effective. Half of the respondents who say who've done this say they've been very effective in finding good agencies to consider. And do you plan to use them in the future? I know this is not the answer I was hoping for. 50% say they're going to do the same number as they've done in the past. 37% say they're going to do more. So not only is it bad now, it's probably going to get worse. Sorry, everybody. And then, just as an idea, I did a roundtable at the Build a Better Agency conference in May with Drew about first-party data. And I just wanted to share some agency opportunities for you with what they told us about first-party data. So we asked them if they have a first-party data collection process. And we described all of this so they know what we're talking about when we talk about first-party data. We gave them a bunch of examples. 72% of them say yes, they do have some process for collecting first-party data from their prospects. A little less when we look at smaller organizations, but it's the same regardless of segment. That doesn't change. And then we asked what their priority is for collecting first-party data, and it's pretty high. 25% say it's a top priority, and 43% say it's an important priority. So 75% overall, this is a big priority for their organizations across segments. Then we asked, have any of your agencies talked to you about the importance of collecting first-party data? 69% say their agencies have done that, which, Drew, means that 31% say their agencies haven't, or they don't know whether their agency has. And then, if their agency talked to them, have any of their agencies proposed first-party data collection support? 2/3 say their agency has proposed ways in which they can help the client gather first-party data, which means that 1/3 have not. So I think there's a big opportunity here, just because that collection of that data is a real priority for these organizations. And I think we as agencies, some of us are missing the boat on talking with them about it or proposing ways that we can help them gather at that. So just an opportunity. So there's some stuff back here in the back where you'll see the appendix. There's that distribution chart that allows you to look at how the segments fall out across. This is age group, but you can pick anything in this list. We have a list of all of the attitudes in an eye chart for you if you just want to look at them all as opposed to by segment. And then my favorite is this one, which is a top 2 box percentage. So instead of showing you the rating, we're showing you the percentage that rated this a 5 or 6 out of 6, where 6 was they agreed with completely. And this is fun because when you go into here and look at this by segment, and you can pick the attributes for just one segment or multiple ones, you can see the huge difference in top 2 box agreement with these attitudes across these segments. So this can be helpful, sort of, I think, when you're thinking about who you're working with and the kinds of things that they're likely to agree with or disagree with as you plan your approach. So that's it on the visualization.
You guys have been very quiet. What questions do you have for us?
Or you can put your hand up if you want to.
Yeah, you can stop sharing probably, Susan, and then we can see them
Okay.
maybe.
I will stop sharing. Okay.
I have a question on maybe the tone of agencies. It seems like some agencies are adapting like a very kind of conversational, buddy-buddy tone. I'm curious if that is something that businesses have a preference for, or is that just kind of a choice on the agency and businesses maybe look for a variety of things?
So when you mean tone, are you just talking sort of about how the culture or the vibe they exude? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that the data would tell us that, Susan. I don't know that we've ever asked that. That's an interesting question. I don't know that we've ever asked it. It will tell you, dealing with hundreds of agencies every year, most of you are, I would say, business casual. So I wouldn't say you're sloppy or buddy like frat buddy casual, but you are business casual, right? Most of you do not present super proper and corporate. You're a little more relaxed than that, but you come off very professional. I mean, I've seen lots of you pitch. I've seen lots of you present. So I think where it gets more buddy is kind of at the account service level, where the account person is trying to cultivate a deeper relationship with the client contact. And so that may get even more casual and more personal, talking about kids or dogs or life outside of work as they really form a deeper bond with that person. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, if I can say, Drew, that I think if you look at an organization's, if they've got content, if they've got, stuff like that, you can kind of look at their site, you can kind of get a feel whether they're how they are, and they can probably get a feel for you too. But I also wonder if this isn't an opportunity for some of those things we talk about asking about, like when you're first, your first content, if you have a few questions like that, the people we're going to be meeting on this, kind of what's your vibe for meetings or whatever, maybe you'd get some good insight.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think you can modify your behavior a little bit. And there's been a lot of conversation in the Facebook page lately about employee attire and how appropriate or inappropriate that is. So I think part of it starts with like your agency's sort of definition of what professional looks like. And then I think you can kind of match it to the client. But if a client wants something that is super buttoned up and corporate, and that's just not who you are, I don't think you're going to be able to sustain that for the long haul. So I think you sort of have to know who and what you are and present appropriately that. But I do think, especially in today's world where we're, on Zooms and things like that, having some conversation around what do we, when we say we show up like professionals, what do we mean by that? Hang on, I've got a couple questions here coming up. So
yeah, what level of client love do they want from the owner, Drew? We've talked about this a lot in other years.
So Roger, that was a question specifically in last year's study, if you remember, and you'll want to grab the executive summary. They expect more attention from the agency owner than we think. So, and remember too that oftentimes the agency owner can go a rung or two on the ladder above the day-to-day point of contact in the client. So you can get to the director of marketing, or maybe the owner of the business, or the president. So, but they do expect the owner to understand what's going on in the business and be their thinking partner and reach out to them and have some deeper, sort of more philosophical conversations. They don't expect the owner to understand the nuance of any project. It's not that, but they do want some client love. So I would say I've always been an advocate of every client should get some client love from the agency owner, but they don't get the same amount. So you have to think about the client size, the value to the agency. Are they a great referral source? Are there other things about them that make them more valuable to the agency? It may not be their billings, it may be other things. but kind of ranking them. And everybody should get some client love from the agency owner at least once a year. And your bigger, more important clients, I would say quarterly. So Tracy says, how does an agency size up, identify which segment a prospect falls into? Always the question, Tracy, every time. That you're spot on with that.
Yeah, and I was just typing, David has sort of a similar question in terms of sort of how do we know and what industries. Here's the thing, guys, and this is consistent across, I don't know, 11 years of studies that we've done. In more cases than not, these are not characteristics you can see on paper that differ between these segments. Sometimes, like we did see a larger percentage of begrudging buyers in that sort of youngest respondent group or whatever. But a lot of the time it's going to be how they think about agencies and what they're looking for in agencies and how they think about themselves in terms of their capabilities. So I think the best approach is to familiarize yourself with those segments and then go in with some questions that are going to give you some clues as to which they probably are, because there are big differences between these segments in terms of their headspace. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I think, first of all, there is no bad segment. So I think everybody always, and have to scroll back up, but to David's point, everyone thinks they want the agency advocates, but what we also saw were bigger budgets with some of the other segments and more volume spends and things like that. So depending on your agency, you have to sort of decide who you can serve best, who can you delight on a regular basis. And then I would develop some questions around each of these segments to help, like, for example, how long is your typical agency relationship? How many agencies do you like to work with? How often do you want your agencies to bring you new ideas? Like you could develop a series of questions that would allow you to have a pretty good guess about which segment these guys would fall into. Any prospect would fall into.
Yep. Andrews has a question about how, when you're saying that clients prefer the RFP process, does that mean we just need to be applying for more RFPs or get into a bed with a search service to help us do that? So I just want to be really clear on what the data said, Andrea. 47% of these respondents say their organization has issued RFPs or RFIs for agency searches in the past. So just under half. And among those who say they have done that, they're going to keep doing it. And most of them are going to keep doing it at the same pace, although a few of them are going to do more. So there's definitely not a majority that say RFPs are the way to go here. It's just that the people who have been using them seem to think they work pretty well and plan to continue using them. But maybe, Drew, you can help with your question about what to do.
Remember, there are also certain industries that kind of require it, right? If it's a government contract, if it's a state contract, if it's a nonprofit, perhaps, there are certain industries or segments that higher education is another one that almost always require an RFP. So if you are an agency that hates RFPs, then you have to think long and hard about going after those kinds of clients because you're a mismatch, right? So be thinking about it's probably going to be smaller companies, privately held, that are not going to go down the RFP path. The larger brands and some of the more regulated industries are going to be more bound by RFP.
Mm-hmm. And another question for Andrea on how to best level up to higher ticket clients. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to show you my card, Drew, but I'm going to tell you after you answer the one word answer I thought you were going to say.
About the higher ticket?
Yeah, about how to level up to higher ticket.
Be an expert.
There you go.
The more you're an expert, if you're a brain surgeon versus a general practitioner, people are going to pay more. And so I'm going to assume that you're already an expert and you're saying how in my segment or in my niche or how I specialize do I level up? And that's a whole different question. So that's probably about cultivating relationships in different places. One of the big things we saw last year in the study is that most of us do not take advantage of the trade shows and conferences where our clients hang out. We don't cultivate relationships there like we should. And I think for many of you, that's a lost opportunity to get to know some of the bigger fish in the industry. I will also say, getting on a stage, being a thought leader, if you are presenting at a conference and you have that third-party endorsement that you're really smart, they're far less likely to care if you're 4 people or 40 people or 400 people. So I think a lot of it is your depth of expertise, how you demonstrate that expertise, and where you go to cultivate relationship.
Yeah, we did that study a couple of years ago with predictive ROI, our friends at that agency, into thought leadership. And one of the things we saw that was dramatic was the percentage of folks that say they would not only be more likely to hire a thought leader or more likely to refer or to stay with a provider who is a thought leader, but they'd be more likely to pay them more who's a thought leader. Right. And I think, again, thought leader expertise, getting that thought leadership. One of the things we saw in this study was that having that reputation as an expert is big, and being a specialist helps you get hired. So I think that stuff's all bundled up together, and that's a good way to go after and start to raise, I think, the potential for your fees and your profitability to improve, and working with bigger clients if that's what you want to do. But being able to charge what you're worth, they need to be able to see that you're an expert, and you telling them that you are isn't going to do it, because they see that a lot. 73% of the folks who followed thought leaders thought most of them, it was just about ego and pitching from the stage. So you have to actually prove it. Yeah, they have to see your stuff out and about and see other people talking about you and how helpful you are and the level.
And it has to be helpful. It has to serve them. And in case any of you missed it, because this doesn't happen very often, Barbara in the chat goes, Drew, you pushed for this with our agency and made all the difference, which I'm interpreting to read, Drew, you're
That's right. Great news.
I don't hear that very often. So I'm just sharing it with all of you on the recording so I can play it for myself.
They get tired with us. With us talking about that. So that's great news.
No.
Yeah.
What else can we tell you guys?
Yeah. Sorry, a boat's going by and my dogs decided to bark at all the boats that go by.
Questions for us? So while we're waiting and watching the chat to see if you have any more questions, again, please know that we will have in a week or so, we'll have the recording, we'll have the visualization, we'll have the deck that you can look at so that you have all of this information. Owner time best spent selling or internal optimizations? Absolutely, owner should be selling. You are the best salesperson in any agency of any size. Once your agency gets to a certain size, I get that you're going to have salespeople and they're going to be out. Or if you're a year or two selling your agency to somebody else, you need to be training somebody else in the methodology of selling so that you don't diminish the value of your own agency by being the only person who can sell. But in general, you should be selling. And quite frankly, most of you aren't that great at the internal optimization. You're not that detail oriented. You're not system minded. So if that happens to be your gift, then yeah, you may be the rare agency owner that should spend more time on that. But I don't care. I do care. 50% of your time should be thought leadership, selling, marketing, connecting, relationship building. And if you want to carve out some of the other 50% to do that optimization stuff, then sure, do that.
And I will tell you, if you can do that thought leadership, it makes selling a lot easier. It makes it go a lot more quickly. People come to you.
It's not painful, right? You're just helping people. That's all.
They come to you and they want your help. Yep.
So Roger says, do clients like gifts, for example, celebrating certain milestones? Yes, but not with your logo on it. Maybe their logo on it, but not, because then it just is smarmy salespeople thing. That you want your logo on their desk. Sure, they love acknowledgments of important things they've done. This, Roger, gets back to your question about awards. They love when you win awards with their work, and they like having the duplicate trophy in their office of the award. So that makes them proud to get, and that's great cachet for them internally as well. So sure that. And do they like you to take them out to dinner? Do they like you to schmooze them? Yeah, but what they actually are hungrier for, and we saw this in last year's study, they're hungrier for the time spent together at things like trade shows and conferences, rather than like going golfing with you or something like that,
Mhm.
which
And
surprised
Roger,
us, frankly.
yeah, and we're in the middle of a study right now, Roger, with our friends at the Expressory. Jamie Shibley has spoken at BABA, and we're actually doing a study on relationships with clients and the whole gifting question, stuff like that. So we'll have some new data on that. They'll be sharing all of that. So there's going to be a whole study sort of about that question, what they like and what they don't.
Last questions for us, anybody?
So the only thing I'd add for everybody, you're going to get this link with the visualization, but if you have any questions about what's in the data or how to explore it, you know, my information will be there. You can always reach me at Susan at Audience Audit. I'm happy to help with, you know, so that you can, we build it so that you can use it. So I want to make sure if you get stuck, just reach out and ask either Drew or I about help.
Yeah, if you have a question on the visualization, don't ask me that.
Don't ask Drew about
Susan,
that
right?
one.
If you have a question about the data and what it means, I'm happy to answer those questions. So on the landing page where we'll put all of this stuff, we'll have our contact information. And as always, know that we are open to your questions and conversations and all of that.
Yep.
All right.
Including what you'd like to see us explore next time, because we'll have another study out next spring. So.
Yep. Before the summit. So thanks you guys for being with us. Hopefully this was super helpful. It's a good use, and shout if we can be helpful. All right.
Bye everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye everybody.